decisive support among Irish people for the extension of these voting rights. However, as I said, the relatively fractured support as to the precise eligibility of Irish citizens abroad demonstrate that this is a complex issue and it will warrant, as the Minister will well know, careful consideration. The Convention also published an options paper looking at allowing Irish citizens outside the state and in the north to vote in the presidential election in particular. The option papers noted that in deciding on the question, a number of legal, policy and logistical considerations had to be borne in mind. Decisions need to be made with regard to which residents outside of the state have the right to vote. Specific consideration needs to be given to the Good Friday Agreement, the unique situations of Irish citizens in the north and the fact that almost all of those born in Northern Ireland are entitled to Irish citizenship makes it essential that any options considered in relation to the extension of the franchise includes this cohort. Extending voting rights to all citizens also gives rise to logistical and administrative challenges as well as cost implications. We are aware of that. Regarding the undocumented Irish Cathaoirleach, it has not been possible for many of these people to return to Ireland for any reason, as they would be granted re-entry into the United States. Living without documentation means living in fear. It's almost impossible. I just heard the story recently of a young man who immigrated from the west of Ireland many years ago, undocumented, succeeded in building up a nice business for himself. He's employing upwards of 50 or 60 people, many of themselves of Irish origin. He has a wife and a family. And if at any time that unfortunate individual were to be come into the limelight by virtue of maybe a speeding offence or something as innocuous as that, and found himself being researched, he would be out of, first of all, he'd be put into some sort of limbo while he'd be checked for all sorts of criminal activity, and finding none, presumably, he would then be on the next plane back to Ireland with all of that structure of his life and family left behind. This is an awful way for people to live, on any human level. This issue affects, obviously, not only the undocumented themselves, but their families here in Ireland, parents, siblings, friends. It's important that the government will use all its influence to try and settle this matter. There are thousands of families torn apart as a result of lack of reform in this area. We in Fianna Fáil are calling on the Minister to engage and continue to support Irish-American organisations throughout the US, such as the Ashling Centre in New York, the Irish Pastoral Centres in Boston, San Francisco and Chicago. We acknowledge that the Government has appointed Deputy John Deasy as a Government Special Envoy to Congress on the undocumented, and I have no hesitation in saying that Deputy Deasy is doing excellent work, and it was most disappointing for him and for our colleague Senator Lawless and for our former spokesman on this issue, Senator Mark Daly, and many others, that at the very last second it fell apart due to the opposition of one senator for reasons of his own. So we are downhearted by that, but we are not totally discouraged, and I'm sure, Minister, you will keep that going. We are in Fianna Fáil are also committed to funding the Immigrant Support Programme, and I've already welcomed the Minister's announcement this morning or this afternoon regarding that. The programme is more vital than ever, particularly in the light of Brexit. It's imperative that when the UK leaves the Union, we continue to maintain and build relationships between between Ireland and the Irish community in Britain. The decision of the UK to leave will change our relationship with the UK significantly. Both Ireland and the UK joined in 1973. Our shared membership allowed us to forge common bonds at EU level and to build strong working relationships, and no doubt our joint membership of the EU helped to facilitate the vitally important Good Friday Agreement. Immigrants returning, Cathaoirleach, have I much time left? Am I gone?
You're just running into injury time.
Well, better referee.
I'll give you a small bit of grace.
Good man. You know I do the same for you, Cathaoirleach. Immigrants coming back to Ireland face huge challenges as well. And we need a cross-department response plan put in place to facilitate Irish people returning to the country. A lot has been put in place, and again I acknowledge, Minister, your own contribution when you launched the Back to Business programme, and that's a very welcome step, but it's apparent that much more will need to be done to support returning Irish immigrants. I'll finish up, Cathaoirleach. It's just on a general note. Look, everybody in Ireland, we're all wearing the green jersey on this. We all have people abroad, whether it's in America, England, South Africa, Eastern Europe, it doesn't matter where they are. They're proud to be Irish, we're proud of them, and we will work with you, Minister, to do the very best for them.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Neil Richards.
I'd like to welcome the Minister of the House again for a debate on a very key issue, and I'm very fortunate to speak here this afternoon. Unfortunately, our Foreign Affairs spokesperson, Senator Joe O'Reilly, is overseas in his very important role as Vice President of the Council of Europe. We're coming up, Minister, to the annual St Patrick's Day. Well, it's really more St Patrick's Week, St Patrick's Month celebrations. I believe the first parades have already happened in certain parts of America. I saw a picture of Chuck Schumer leading a parade just last week. And it is absolutely a fabulous time of year. I was very fortunate last year to spend St Patrick's Day in London, and this year I'll travel abroad in a personal capacity. And it's only when you have the opportunity to go abroad that you see how vitally important that day and the days around it are to so many people abroad. And needless to say, we will have the same cynics, as we always do every year, bemoaning the fact that the government, and indeed all political parties, let's be fair though, people from all parties will be going abroad to engage with our diaspora on this most important days. And it's the usual rhetoric, oh, the price of flights, or they should be doing this, they should be doing that. But I think this year of all, when we face so many uncertain challenges, be it with Brexit or certain rises of certain regimes, be it in the US or across Europe, it really underscores how important these St Patrick's Day trade missions and outreach missions by the government are. Not just to our diaspora, the 70-odd million of our diaspora that are abroad, but also to Ireland. Because let's be quite frank, there is a monetary return on every single one of these trade missions, be it to the United States. I believe that Cathaoirleach is off to Russia this year from this House, and so many others, where there are great opportunities for trade and investment partnerships. Trade and investment partnerships that are going to be so vitally important to this state as we face into so many challenges. But I suppose it does ask the question, well, how do we reach out to our diaspora beyond the 17th of March or the weeks either side? And I do welcome the announcement of an additional funds here, Minister, and I do sense that there's probably a large amount of agreement across the House in how we approach our diaspora, regardless of what party we speak on behalf. And I think that's something to be quite welcome, because this goes so much further than party politics. But I do ask, Minister, there used to be the tradition of the Certificate of Heritage for those who are maybe diaspora a few more generations gone and they aren't eligible to apply for their passports. And I think that's something that we could look at maybe bringing back and indeed formalising. And I welcome the fact that we will have the referendum in the back end of October. And this, I'll be quite frank, Minister, this is an issue that I personally have had a bit of difficulty with. I had concerns, well, does this open to the gate? Do we allow for, essentially representation without taxation? Are we going to have the diaspora voting in other elections or referenda? And it's something that I'm not too comfortable with. But I think for something like the presidency, the President doesn't simply recommend the people in the 26 counties. It goes so much further than beyond that. And that's why I welcome this referendum. And I indeed, not only will I be voting in favour, but I look forward to campaigning with it across the constituency. And indeed, I've done a lot of work. I'm very fortunate to be convener of the French-Irish Friendship Group under the Count Cordes, and I do a lot of work with the French senators who represent the French abroad. And I think within our context of Shannon reform, I would really welcome a formal seat, or indeed a couple of seats, in this House for the diaspora. And we've seen the excellent contributions that we have from Senator Lawless as the voice of the diaspora, but equally from Senators Marshall and O'Dongla giving a voice to the Irish citizens across the border in this House. And I think that's very important, and we need to recognise it as we face changing times. And I think the Seanad provides that unique opportunity, and it's something, now that we've decided to retain the Seanad, it's something that I think we should really invest the time in developing and really embrace it. The other thing that I want to look at quite crucially, and Senator O'Sullivan referred to it as well, is in relation to the diaspora in the United Kingdom. The estimated potentially 2 million Irish citizens that reside in the island of Great Britain, and what role they can play post 29th of March or whatever day Brexit does actually happen, if it ever does happen, and the importance that that community will play in maintaining UK-Irish relations post-Brexit. We will be very fortunate as one of the only remaining 27 member states that we are able to maintain bilateral relations through the institutions of the Good Friday Agreement. But we will also be able to maintain really solid relations through our diaspora in the UK, and equally through the diaspora, the 300,000 or so British citizens living in this jurisdiction. I think one of the key issues, and it was come up again, is the issue of passports. You know, the amount of people, the surge of applications for Irish passports in the UK. And I read quite angrily the article in the Irish Times yesterday of this very cynical approach by a Mr Fleming of Manchester, who voted leave but made sure he got his passport because he wants to be able to get through customs quicker in Spain. And look, those anomalies will always crop up. The fact that Ian Paisley Jr hangs out Irish passport forms in his constituency clinic doesn't exactly sit comfortably with me, but if that means that certain people in the north can get their Irish passport quicker, I say fair play. And I embrace that, because I think we need to embrace every single one of our diaspora, even if we might at times question their motives and fundamentally disagree with their outlook. But using our diaspora in the UK is going to be so important, Minister. I think we need to double down on it. I welcome the reopening of the consulate in Cardiff to complement the consulate in Edinburgh and indeed the embassy in London. But to conclude, Lascairlock, I think there is a great opportunity to go even further, to strengthen our team in Great Britain and perhaps look at further consulates, be it one to look after the Northern Powerhouse region based in Manchester, or indeed the really unique and very colourful Irish community around Coventry and Birmingham, who contributed so much to the UK and particularly the post-war reconstruction of the UK, and how much they can offer in return to us and we can offer to them.
Thank you, Senator. And Senator Neil O'Donnell, and you want to...
Yes, I'm going to share with Rose Conway Walsh, if that's agreeable to members.
That agreed? Agreed.
4 and
4, is it?
4 and 4. Minister Cannon, you're very welcome for a timely discussion and statements on the diasporas. Other colleagues have rightly acknowledged we're heading into that crucially important period where we, I suppose, redouble our efforts of engagement with our diaspora around the world, and I, like others, want to commend your personal commitment in your role as Minister for the diaspora in the work that you have carried out to bolster and energise that engagement, because you do understand and appreciate the important role that our diaspora play. But importantly, as you've acknowledged here today too, you acknowledge or you understand the responsibility that we have to our diaspora as well, and that mutually beneficial relationship is very important. I want to touch on a number of topics very briefly before my colleague comes in, and that is to really just say that since I have taken on this role as spokesperson for the diaspora for the Sinn Féin team in the Seanad, it's been a great privilege, and other colleagues will acknowledge this too. It's been a great privilege to go overseas and to engage our diaspora, to see the fantastic work that members of the Irish community abroad are involved in, and the real benefit they're bringing to the life of their home places where they are now. But coupled with that, and we do have that privilege to see and hear about those success stories, I also want to reinforce the point made by Senator O'Sullivan. There are countless numbers of our diaspora who are suffering, who are under pressure, and who do need that support from home, whether that's their family structures, whether that's their friends, whether that's their colleagues or their fellow club members, whatever it might be. So it's positive to hear that the Emigrant Fund has been increased under your watch, Minister, and I hope that will be directed in a way that it can make practical and tangible differences to those people who most need it. I also note, Minister, the announcement by government. It's something that I have raised here numerous times since coming into the Seanad, and you and I have engaged on it extensively, the issue of the referendum on presidential votes. I think the diaspora community, as has been seen in the last number of big significant referenda here at home, will have a crucial part to play, will want to be invested in that campaign. But on this occasion, it's actually something that's going to give them a real tangible benefit and outcome, and that is to have the say in who holds the office of President, the first citizen, a symbolic office that does represent not a landmass, but the Irish people, no matter where on the globe they reside. So that's why it's so important. A vote in this election won't be anything other than a vote to a vote for someone else, a vote for a fellow Irish citizen. And I think that's a positive thing. I think that's a good thing. I want to just flag up, Minister, and I know this won't have been your responsibility, but as we enter into this debate, there's a chance that this will start, if colleagues do commit to campaigning on this issue as vigorously as they say they will, and I'm sure we all collectively will, because it will take that. But I just want to make the point, I've made it in here before, I just want to get the right sentence. Anyway, I can't find it, but what it does, yes, it is also an important statement to our citizens abroad and in Northern Ireland that we value them and their connection to Ireland. I live in Ballyvagarage in Milfirst. I don't have a connection to Ireland. I'm in Ireland and I'm Irish, so I just would err on the side of caution when we're making these statements, that we understand that there's a difference between the diaspora and the Irish community and Irish citizens in the north of our country. So it's important to make that important distinction. But, Minister, again, I commend you. I wish your work well. Gnéirí Lat. Good luck, in particular, as you travel around to re-engage with the diaspora around the world. I know and I'm confident you'll take the message of the importance of this election in October, and to encourage and lobby our diaspora to be just as active. And those who can, those who do have the ability to come home to vote, need to come home and vote and invest in their fellow diaspora.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Rose-Conway.
And thank you, Minister, for coming to the House. And firstly, I want to wish happy St. Patrick's Day to all our diaspora and our citizens in the north as well, Niall. It's just over... No, absolutely not. It's just over a year since we had statements on the diaspora in the Dáil, and therefore it seems like the perfect time to measure the achievements of the government based on the commitments made back then. But last year you welcomed the publication of the Indecon economic survey of problems associated with returning immigrants. And I suppose the question today is, are you satisfied with your department's actions so far on the 30 targeted recommendations? And have you, and you may have done this that I haven't seen it, but have you provided a dashboard indicating progress made on each of the recommendations, just as the other working groups do? And those recommendations obviously were around housing, barriers to housing for people returning, both in relation to accessing mortgages and in relation to people who need to access social housing and to be part of the housing waiting list. The motor-related issues as well, I'll talk about in a minute, the employment issues, the health and childcare issues, the welfare issues, the education issues and the entrepreneurial issues, and of course the voting rights. And I think we can send a really big strong message to our diaspora to say, you matter to us. And the way we can do that is to have the referendum on voting rights and to campaign vigorously. And I would encourage everybody to get involved in that. And I particularly encourage families who have family members living abroad to get involved in that. And I certainly intend to play a very active role in it. And I do want to commend my own colleague Niall O'Donnell for all the work that he has done on it as well, and leading the Sinn Féin team here in the Seanad. And as was said earlier as well, the undocumented Irish. Absolutely, you know, we cannot continue, and I know that we could, but I think collectively we need to keep the pressure on there that we cannot have a situation where, as we have and as we've all had to deal with, and I know you would have yourself as well, Minister, where Irish citizens are picked up abroad and incarcerated and have to go through all of that and living in fear because they're undocumented. A couple of the other things around the... You see, we've had multi-generational immigration here. And the other issue is how we then, and say going back even to the 60s, so people whose parents were born abroad, and then you have them maybe born in Ireland and you have back and over. And their children now, to get an Irish passport, have to go through the naturalisation process. And that is hugely expensive. So if somebody has, like people I know that maybe have 3 or 4 or 5 children, trying to get passports for them, it costs thousands of euro, and it's something I would ask you to have a look at, the naturalisation process, because it's government policy in the main, successive governments, that have driven people away through no fault of their own at the time. The other thing I want to talk to you about is the agriculture and the returning immigrants in relation to access to particularly the Young Farmers Scheme and access to the National Reserve. And I know this was cited in the Indicon report, and it was that, you know, the same rules have to be for everybody. They certainly do. But I think we need a bit of flexibility around that, particularly in relation to the qualifications and the income thresholds there. I think there is much more that can be done there. Of course, car insurance was identified as well by all parties as being a major barrier, and the Ministerial Working Group on the Cost of Insurance in its latest report said that the issue of high insurance costs associated with returning immigrants is still outstanding. So I think, again, we have to keep the pressure on the motor industry to sort out things there. I acknowledge the work that has been done, but I think there's ministerial orders that could be done across a lot of these things that would see real tangible results for the diaspora.
Senator John O'Mahony.
Cathaoirleach, I'm delighted to contribute to this debate and to welcome the Minister Cannon here and compliment him on the work that he's doing, keep connecting with our diaspora abroad, and indeed before him Minister McHugh and I think Minister Deenahan. You know, it's important, as other speakers have said, that the government places a huge emphasis on connecting with our diaspora abroad. Being an island nation, immigration has been part of a feature of this country for hundreds of years. Often in the past, where it was enforced because of lack of having a livelihood here in Ireland, or the lack of job opportunities, and the state of our economy. But thankfully, in recent times, it has been more of a lifestyle choice where our young people, students, graduates, etc., wish to travel and broaden their horizons and hope before hopefully returning, or many of them returning at some stage. And I certainly want to agree with, again, previous senators who have, you know, the need to, I suppose, smooth the passage back for our immigrants when they do want to come back. With, you know, sometimes there are obstacles there, and whatever has to be done or needs to be done should be done there, because there's a huge resource in these people coming back to the country and contributing to it. And I've seen where you've spoken on that yourself, Minister, at times. And I would very much welcome the announcement of an increase in funding for the Immigrant Support Programme, and welcome very much the prospect of the referendum and votes for our diaspora in the presidential election. The undocumented Irish, I suppose, has been an ongoing issue, which appears at times to be on the threshold of being solved, and all of a sudden there's some setback. But I know that it is important to progress it at every level, and I was glad to see when Deputy DC was appointed, if you like, to try and work especially on that project, and whatever can be done from this side of from within our government and our people to make that solution better for all our undocumented Irish. It is important. I suppose in my own experiences, I have seen at first hand many of my trips abroad over the years has been in a sporting context and in a GA context, and I've seen at first hand, we'll say, the connection that Irish people have with culture, music, language and games. It becomes so important. In fact, you know, what amazes me sometimes, where you meet people here maybe before they went, and you wouldn't realise how you know, some of the things that the discussion you have with them, I think when you're abroad is in contrast. You know, it might have been latent here, but it is very much to the top of their agenda when they go abroad. And I think that it's, you know, the fact that we are connecting with them, the fact that we are supporting them is you know, I think is absolutely crucial. For, you know, last May I was in New York at the Connacht Championship game between Leitrim and New York, and on the Monday evening I was out for a walk and I heard there was a park in the forest and I heard games going on, and I was wondering, was it baseball or whatever? And when I drove up and my curiosity got to me, I walked in. Here we had people, adults coaching about 40 young children in Gaelic football. I chatted and took part in some of it when I was there. I was amazed, really. Here it was near Yonkers in New York, but here we had people who had immigrated. The adults had done well, and now were training their kids. And you had kids running around in all the various club and county jerseys from Ireland. And you know, the GA. There's 400 clubs, I understand now, internationally all over the world, and I know that the GA is very supportive and of that. And in fact, only in the last few weeks, I connected a group in New York or in Sarajevo who are having an Irish festival for St. Patrick's weekend, and they have incorporated a coaching sessions on the day as well for the children of the diaspora, and the GA have a unit, if you like, to support all of that, and that is tremendous to hear that. So I think that I don't know where we are in relation to diaspora abroad, relation to other countries, but I imagine, from my experience when I travel abroad, it's such a small world and there's so many Irish connections everywhere, and long may it continue that our government, through you, Minister, and all of the various departments would continue to reach out to embrace and to support our diaspora abroad. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Batchik.
I'd like to welcome Minister to the House and welcome the opportunity to speak on the diaspora today, on a timely date, of course, in the lead up to the St. Patrick's Day weekend. And very much welcome the statements in your speech, Minister, in particular your announcement of an increase of €1 million in the allocation for the Emigrant Support Programme in 2019. I think that's really good to see. As you said, the Emigrant Support Programme is a tangible expression of our care for and value in our diaspora. So that's really welcome. And I also do very much welcome the new diaspora policy and the engagement you've described that will be carried on this year in terms of developing the new diaspora policy. And I also want to, as others have done, just commend our colleague Senator Billy Lawless for all his work on highlighting the importance of the Irish diaspora, and also on working in a practical sense to ensure that recognition is given to undocumented Irish in the US. And I know he's continuing that work. I just wanted to speak, I suppose, on three different aspects of diaspora relations. And I speak as somebody who is just among 6 members of the Oireachtas elected in part by members of the diaspora, because of course the university senators, both Dublin University and NUI, are unique. We are unique among the other Oireachtas members because our electorate includes Irish citizens living abroad, people who are resident in countries outside of Ireland, and indeed looking at my own at the Shannon Register for Trinity, for example, I've seen among the 50,000 voters, we have voters as far afield as the Pacific Islands, lots in Australia, New Zealand and so on, all of whom are entitled to vote. And that's a really important really important part of our electorate, and it's really important, I think, that any of us who are university senators would acknowledge that role and acknowledge the fact that it's not, it's not unknown to our political system to have diaspora votes, and I think that's important. So I wanted to talk as somebody who represents members of the diaspora, as somebody who myself spent 3 years living abroad in London and was very active in different groups there, including the Irish Women's Abortion Support Group in London, which for many years provided practical help and assistance to the thousands of Irish women who had to leave Ireland for so many years to access reproductive health services abroad. And thankfully, now that we have changed our own law through repeal of the 8th Amendment last year, that route is no longer necessary for most women. But the IWAS group that I was part of in London, along with my colleague Senator Kelleher here, that played a really important role over many years. And indeed, many of the members of our group were themselves second-generation Irish. So Senator Conway Walsh talked about generational immigration, and they had grown up Irish in London and really having that dual identity of being both from London but also from Ireland, and were very active in other Irish emigrant groups abroad as well, including the Irish centres and including Irish music and Irish cultural groups. So I have a particular interest in this. So I wanted to talk first about the issue of votes for diaspora, which you've addressed, Minister, a little bit. Also to talk about the changing relationship that we have with our diaspora, and finally just a word about Irish aid, about the other side of the diaspora issue, really, where we talk about Ireland reaching out and our contribution on overseas development aid, and of course the launch just last week of the A Better World policy, which I very much welcomed in this House. I couldn't get to the launch, but I was in this House welcoming it on the same morning. So first, just to mention, to very much welcome the announcement that there will be a referendum. I know that I thought it was to be in May of this year. I see now the Taoiseach has announced that it will be held at the end of October this year, but it is good to see at last the referendum being put to the people as to whether to extend voting rights in presidential elections to Irish citizens outside the state. And I do welcome that announcement, and I will be very happy to campaign for that referendum to pass. I hope we will see it passed. I was proud some years ago to lead the Labour Party delegation in the Constitutional Convention, which recommended by a 78% majority in 2013 that we would extend voter rights in presidential elections to Irish citizens resident abroad. And I think all of us who were participating in that convention found it an extremely moving experience, actually, to hear from members of our diaspora who gave testimony broadcast into the convention in Malahide, in the Grand Hotel Malahide. They gave testimony on video screens, and some of them had got up, of course, in the middle of the night to do this, and they had very powerful, spoke very powerfully and very eloquently and very movingly about why they would seek the right to vote in presidential elections, how connected they felt to their country of origin. Some of them, as I say, were, some of them had only left Ireland in a few years previously, some had been away a long time, and some were indeed were Irish citizens who might have had very little physical connection to Ireland, but a very strong emotional and mental and identity connection. So I'm very glad we will have that referendum finally this year, and I hope we will see then that referendum passes, and that we'll have Irish citizens resident abroad able to vote in the next presidential election in 6 years' time. I wanted just briefly to also mention the changing relationship. Some years ago now, of course, Mary Robinson, on her first election as president, as the first woman president of Ireland in 1990, laid a huge emphasis on connection with the diaspora, and famously lit a candle in the window of the Orus, which was a powerful symbolic expression of the cherishing of the diaspora. And she spoke about the truest way of cherishing the diaspora. But she also spoke about the changing relationship. She says, diaspora in its meaning of dispersal or scattering includes the many ways, not always chosen, that people have left this island. To cherish is to value and to nurture and support. If we are honest, we will acknowledge that those who leave do not always feel cherished. So that moment in 1990 marked a really important shift, I think, in our relationship with diaspora, and a recognition that that relationship must remain dynamic, that it must evolve to meet changing circumstances, and that there are very different needs and very different groups of people within the diaspora. And I know that in many ways, since then, we've sought to reach out and to show a greater level of cherishing through the Presidential Distinguished Service Service Award, for example, which I think you mentioned, first awarded in 2012, awarded last year to writer Edna O'Brien, who's written so powerfully from exile, if you like, about the experience of growing up in Ireland in the 1950s. We saw just this year the brilliant exhibition curated by Dr. Angela Byrne in collaboration between Epic and Melanie Lynch of her story, along with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, which is travelling to Irish embassies around the world, I think, this year, and which is featuring a number of remarkable Irish women who've blazed a trail internationally as members of our diaspora, including, of course, Eileen Gray, the designer and architect, Eva Gore-Booth and others, including Margaret O'Shaughnessy Heckler, who was the first woman to hold the post of US Ambassador to Ireland, and other women who I hadn't heard of before this exhibition. So I think that's really good to see. And finally, Minister, I just wanted to again welcome the new policy on overseas development aid published last week, headlined A Better World, and which I think shows us how important a role a small country like Ireland, but with a big diaspora, can play on a world stage in making a contribution back to countries which are still developing and which are to whom I think we need to be reaching out in support. And I'm really glad to see that in that new policy there's a clear commitment to placing the Sustainable Development Goals at the heart of development policy and a reaffirmation of our commitment to the UN target of achieving 0.7% of GNI in terms of our overseas development aid contribution by 2030. I would also say that I really welcome the announcement of new initiatives on sexual and reproductive health and rights contained within the document. It's something that on the Foreign Affairs Committee I had certainly been pressing for, as had my colleagues on that committee, and I know that's really welcome. I know there have been criticisms expressed in this House of that commitment, but I just want to say that I think it's really important that we see that so clearly expressed and such a strong emphasis on particular priority issues around climate justice, but also around women's equality and around sexual and reproductive health and rights for women. So I just want to end by commending the Department of Foreign Affairs on this initiative, and Irish Aid indeed, and to say that in Foreign Affairs Committee we, I think, will continue to support Irish Aid and initiatives as well as supporting our diaspora abroad, because we see that as two parts of the same coin, of Ireland's reaching out and Ireland taking a place on the world stage.
Thank you very much, Senator. Minister, to conclude.
How long have I got?
Well, you have 6 minutes anyway.
6. We'll go with that.
But I've seen that I gave others up to administration. I'll do that.
I won't go on. Thanks to each and every one of you for your excellent contributions, which were made from a place obvious to me that you share my values in terms of how we engage with and support our diaspora communities worldwide. I'm just going to quickly run through each individual contribution and respond as best I can. Senator O'Sullivan, I agree wholeheartedly with you when you describe the opportunity to extend the presidential vote to our people worldwide as a meaningful and concrete way to show our support for our diaspora. I think it is more than fitting that the person who best embodies who we are as a people, our first citizen, our President, should be chosen by all members of our citizenship around the world. And I'm particularly heartened to hear every single senator who contributed earlier committing to being actively involved in that campaign as we move towards a referendum at the end of October. You also suggested, quite rightly, Senator O'Sullivan, that we need to adopt a cross-departmental approach in relation to our returning emigrants, in relation to tackling the challenges that they have faced. And thankfully, that cross-departmental process has been underway for almost 2 years now through the work of an interdepartmental committee, which has a representation from every single government department and which seeks to minimise to the greatest possible extent the obstacles being faced by our returning emigrants. You also, as again many other senators, made a contribution around the undocumented. Our objectives regarding the undocumented remain constant, namely to achieve relief for the undocumented and to facilitate greater pathways for legal migration to the United States. But none of us in this room underestimate the size of that challenge. We know that this is a policy area that has been very, very divisive within the US political system for decades, with pronounced disagreements, sometimes even within the same political parties, and the best way to deal with an issue that affects not only the Irish undocumented, but indeed over 11 million undocumented across the whole of the United States. The Government, our Special Envoy John Deasy and our Ambassador in Washington, Dan Mulhall, have consistently engaged with both parties in a bipartisan way to address our long-standing concerns, and this continues to be our best approach and will remain our approach. Our embassy in Washington, our 6 consulates across the US work continuously and tirelessly with Irish immigration centres in order to provide vital services to the undocumented. And just last month, I visited the Irish Pastoral Centre in Boston to hear directly from those who work on a daily basis supporting our undocumented. So our government remains wholly committed to ultimately working with the US authorities to resolve the plight of the undocumented, hopefully sooner rather than later. Senator Richmond obviously pointed out the huge benefits of St Patrick's Day in terms of a celebration of Irish identity and culture across the world, and it does present a huge opportunity for Ireland in terms of connecting with our people worldwide and allowing Ireland to significantly expand its sphere of influence, be it in terms of business, culture and other facets of society worldwide. Senator O'Donnell made the point that we need to care for the welfare and look out for the welfare of our diaspora in Britain, particularly in the context of Brexit. In my speech last week to the Dáil on the issue of Brexit and in the legislation currently going through both houses, I made the point that we remain absolutely supportive of our Irish community in Britain and will remain completely supportive of them post-Brexit. Because Britain has represented one of the most important destinations for Irish emigration for centuries now at this point, and that's reflected in our emigrant support programme expenditure in Britain. In 2018, over €5.9 million was awarded to 108 organisations across Britain. 88% of that funding, almost €5 million, was devoted to welfare support. And as you all know, as many established Irish communities in Britain are ageing, the welfare provided under the ESP is becoming more important, because these community organisations, who do extraordinary work, represent a vital lifeline to disadvantaged emigrants, facilitating their access to local services and combating what is increasingly a problem of social isolation and alienation. And again, obviously, Neil O'Donnell spoke very eloquently and passionately about the need to make sure we succeed in winning that referendum in October. Senator Conway Walsh also referred to the Indicon report and asked, is there an ongoing dashboard of results in terms of, yes, there is the answer to that question. There were 30 recommendations in that report. 19 have been fully addressed, 6 are under consideration, and we're bringing a report to government on progress in that in the coming weeks, and again that report will be available for the senators here in the House. The main issues addressed in the Indicon report were around driving licences, and thankfully we've been working with the Department of Transport so that if you're now returning to Ireland and you've been returning from a country that does not have a driving licence exchange agreement with Ireland, previously you needed to begin the whole process of doing 12 driving lessons before you could actually get a licence. In conjunction with the Department of Transport, we've now reduced that to 6 lessons. Around the issue of car insurance, we've been actively engaging through the Department of Finance with car insurance companies, and there's been a protocol put in place now where if you return to Ireland, again from a far-flung destination, with documentary evidence of a safe driving record in that country and of a no claims relationship with your insurance company in that country, the vast majority of Irish car insurance companies are now accepting that documentation as evidence of a safe driving record, and the list of companies that are accepting that are available on the Department's website. Senator Rose Conway-Walsh also spoke about young farmers' access to the National Reserve. There was no discrimination whatsoever applying to returning immigrants in that context. All applicants, be they returning immigrants or indeed people who have been living in this country, are all treated equally. And in fact, I'm informed by colleagues in the Department of Agriculture that a number of returning immigrants have actually gained access to these supports. Senator Mahoney spoke again about the undocumented. He also spoke quite rightly about the extraordinary contribution of the GAA to community building across all Irish communities in the world. Those 400 clubs, many of whom I met recently at the Asian Games, where I officially opened the Asian Games in Bangkok. 1,000 players, supporters and mentors gathering from all over Asia in Bangkok to celebrate our national games and partake in a whole series of championships over that weekend. We also have a very strong relationship between the Department of Foreign Affairs and the GAA in terms of funding capital investment in GAA facilities worldwide, and we recently announced a very significant investment in McGovern Park and Ruislip in London in collaboration with Croke Park to see that facility finish off to a very high standard. Senator Batchik quite rightly commended the role of Senator Billy Lawless, who has been a powerful advocate for our diaspora communities worldwide here in the Senate. She also cited the importance of the referendum in terms of that sense of community building and making the point that it is more than appropriate that all of our citizens worldwide would have the opportunity to choose our first citizen, and quite rightly pointing out that we already have members of our diaspora who have a role in deciding who the members of this House are. She also mentioned an exhibition that is currently touring some of our embassies and missions worldwide, originating in EPIC, outlining the extraordinary contribution made by women members of our diaspora. That exhibition and that research work arose as a result of our own department, our own Global Irish Unit, funding an in-house historian in EPIC who has actually researched all of that and will continue to research the contribution of members of our diaspora in other contexts as well, and hopefully have similarly powerful exhibitions in the future. So, just to conclude, thanks to each and everyone once again for your excellent contributions. There's no question, but there's an absolute consensus in this House as to how we continue to work, that we should continue to work with our diaspora communities worldwide. We should continue to invest significantly in them, and that we should work collectively to ensure the success of that referendum in October. You know, and Senator O'Sullivan spoke earlier on about the power of technology in connecting people worldwide, and there's no question but that in the next 2 or 3 decades, as that technology becomes ever more ubiquitous and ever more powerful, the opportunity to community build for communities of shared interest across the world to congregate and convene online, support one another, engage one another, nurture one another. The opportunity to connect our 70 million Irish people all over the world will become an ever more powerful one. And we need to work hard and work collectively to support that community, to continue investing in that community, because it is an extraordinary opportunity to build something really effective and really powerful that will be as meaningful for a member of our diaspora living in a Pacific island or living in London or living in LA, wherever they may be, that they will feel part of something greater than themselves and something that is of immense benefit to them and to their family and to their community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Can I call on the Acting Leader to move to suspension of the House until 2:15?
Until?
2:15 p.m.
Okay, I propose suspension until 2:15.
Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Sitting stands suspended.